guys. I'm very, very excited. It's been a great amount of people and energy put into this event. And, I really thank you guys for doing this for everybody.
Thank you. It means so much. Thank you. But that's what it's all about then. Just about sharing, loving each other, and just bringing everything forward. Rob, I have been so excited to talk to you. They call you the EP Whisperer, and I've watched your journey personally, actually, unfold over a couple of years. And you have two rather interesting um, characters, connections. Um, one is called Griff, and the other is called Fred. I'm going to leave you to tell us more about Adrift and Fred and you and your channeling and what you do. Go ahead.
All right, thank you for the beautiful introduction. And my name's Rob Bothier. I'm the ET Whisperer. The way I got that name is through a very personal journey of mine. I am a channeler. And for those of you who might wonder what that is, it's just my own consciousness acting with consciousness that I perceive to be smarter than myself. So very helpful for me when I'm able to integrate and use that energy and produce communication for other people's benefits, my own benefits a lot, and even their benefits. And I suppose I'll get into that in a minute. But basically, I had a very rough decade. I was on drugs for a long time after I had learned that my son, who was born with cerebral palsy, wasn't going to be able to walk or talk. He's 17 right now in the state of condition. I have to bathe him, give him diapers, feed him. He can't walk, so he's in a wheelchair. Pretty much, it's like having a 4 or 5 month old child, but in a 17-year-old body. Um, so when I found out what the extent of that was going to look like, it really became a big fear for me. And I got really depressed, and I got into a car accident in the winter. I live in Michigan, so it's always snowing all winter long. Um, I hit a tree at about 40 miles an hour, and I messed up my shoulder pretty bad. Doctors put me on pain medicine, and it's like doctors do. The more you tell them you need, the more they'll give you. And I worked my way up to some very heavy pain medicines. I started out with Vicodin, and by the time I ended up on Oxycontin and morphine sulfate. So they were extremely strong painkiller. Yes, whoa.
Yeah.
Those of you who don't know, most people who are sick with cancer or who are in hospitals for major pain, they usually give them 30 milligrams of morphine or 60. And I was taking about 1,000 milligrams a day, twice a day, 500 each time. So um, through that, uh, after a while, the doctors realized that I was taking more than I needed, so they pulled me off. And a couple months before they pulled me off, I realized how bad I was addicted because I was taking my medicine one day. I wasn't in much pain, and I thought I got the flu. I started throwing up. I couldn't move. It was like the worst flu I had in the world times 10. This was before the swine flu breakout came. So I thought maybe this is a new strain of flu. It's just kicking my butt real bad. And later on that day, I finally had someone go grab my medicine, and I took a little bit because the pain was so intense, and my sickness was gone right then. I started studying, and I found out what medicine I was taking, what implications that meant for me. So that led me down to being picked off by the doctor. After that, I went to the streets to start finding it. And when you go to the streets to find something, you find a lot more than what you're looking for. So I got hooked into a lot of really bad stuff, and I did that for multiple years. The one consistent in my life at that point was my son. It's funny. I hear a lot of. Well, it's not funny, but it's interesting to hear all these stories of people and their addiction, how they won't be by their children or how they abandon their children. That was the one thing I did. That was the only thing I really cared about more than myself, more than anything, was my son and his whole experience and taking care of him. So what I did is I went through that process and spiraled down. And after a process, I finally started getting better. I figured out this is not the road I want to be in the life for me. So I ended up quitting, and that was a process in and of itself. It took a couple of years, but after I got off of all the medicine that I was on, I ended up going and just started experiencing life a little differently. And something that was amazing is all the way through my teenage years and all the way up until I had my son, I was always a rowdy character, always getting in trouble. I led a pretty odd and violent life in between, and when the drugs came in, it made it twice as bad. So I continued on that journey, and when I got off drugs, all of a sudden everything changed. Like even before I was a teenager, things started having beauty to it. It's a very long and interesting story, that process, which I've shared on YouTube. If you ever want to know the whole story, just go and look at the interview with Ed. The interview they did with me was a beautiful one. But I finally found this beauty in my life. Everything was great. Animals, trees, sunrises, everything started having something with a level of beauty that I'd never conceived before. I was raised with my family as a Christian, and as a Christian, I always thought that there was a God, but every time as a young child, I would question some of the things to the Bible, the preacher, the people, the parishioners, anyone from the church who didn't agree with what I had to say. They just did not like that type of question. Like,
sorry to interrupt. My partner's just come in to tell me that we have a great big craft that has just appeared here in England. So I thought I'd just get that in there, that we have a presence at the moment, and it is what time is it? 2:41 here in England. And what colour is it? It's a bright white ball glowing in the sky. So there we go. Sorry for interrupting.
that is amazing. I love that. We've had some good experiences too. Every time I get together with a lot of people who are interested in extraterrestrials, it happens. At one event we did in LA, we had a friend from the UK. He saw 5 or 6 ships flying over Los Angeles and got it on tape. So it was amazing. But yeah, so I went down through this path, and after a point, I started wanting to find that thing that I used to have as a child. I always had a God presence there, but I wanted to find the version that I could be cool with because I knew the kind that I had learned as a kid wasn't for me. So I looked around, and one thing that was always interesting as a child, I always had a really intense version of excitement for ghosts or people who had passed from this side to the other side, and I'd always kind of wondered what was going on there, but never had the wherewithal or just too much apathy in most of the time to actually go and search for that. So at this time, I'm excited. I'm like, what can we do here? I had an experience as a child too, and now that I look back, I know that it was my grandmother, but I had this information coming from her about my mom that I never knew because it's a grandmother I'd never met before. She had passed before I was born, so I went to my mom, and they always said, "Oh, it's just, it's just a dream. It's pretty amazing dream, but it's a dream." So I go back and I'm looking at all the things that have happened in my life. I also had a sighting of a UFO, and the closest one, even still to this day, huge craft when I was 13. And at that age, after that sighting, in retrospect, I realized that's when I started getting into the violence and stuff. Something activated me in that moment when I saw that. So I started going to look back at everything that happened in my life, and I realized I wanted to find something that could give me the answers of what those spirits were. So I found a spiritualism church, and the spiritualism church's premise was I can tell you about God and afterlife because we can communicate with those people who passed over. The church itself has tons of mediums. They're based in Lilydale, New York, in the U.S. and all over the world. Europe has tons of spiritualism churches, and those seemed like that was the best bet for me. They still believed in God, a version of God that, in my opinion, was much less limited, and also they could communicate. So I went there for my first time, and when I did, this person gave me information about my child, about my life, and about an ancestor that I actually didn't have a chance to confirm until later when I talked to my dad about what happened. He did a family tree line, so he went back and actually looked at this information and found out it was true. So I was pretty amazed, and I was like, I wish I could do that. And I was telling the guy, and they said, you can, everyone can. Anyone who wants to can do this. And that excited me. So I stayed with them for a long time, for multiple months, and I learned how to meditate, and it was really great. And as in most religions, in my experience, I found dogma in the church starting to play out. I found internal strife starting to play out. Half of the church didn't believe in reincarnation, the other half did. And I'm like, if you guys are organized a unit of God connection, this is a pretty big thing that you should be able to try to at least find common ground, but no one would even talk about it in the church. It would spark arguments and fights. So that pulled me back from the church. I started going online and looking, and I found some binaural beats. These are basically just meditation sound vibrations that they basically synchronize the hemispheres of the brain to allow the maximum effect of meditation. So I found those very useful, and they took me to a whole new level of meditation. After I left the church, it kind of plateaued. I could really get relaxed, and I could get visions a little bit here and there, just a couple seconds here and there, or words here and there. Nothing really intense, but that was very powerful, the very first one I did. So I continued doing this, and I taught myself a couple techniques on the way. And during one night, during a really messed up night, I was emotionally distraught. I come in and I say, this is my time, pull back from that energy, and I jumped into meditation. Now, the type of meditation I did was numbered from 1 step to 21, and I went beyond the 21 state. So I took a step further than I ever did. That night, in the astral projection, I met my guy, the one we're talking about called Treb. And I saw him just as clearly as I see all of you guys. He was gigantic, 7.5 foot, scary, green body, big teeth. Basically, the worst nightmare you could have.
Wow.
Experience. It was terrifying.
What did you do?
Well, I almost had what felt like a heart attack without my body being there, but only lasted for a second. And after that, I felt this like punch in the heart, and this punch in the heart, I was already feeling extreme emotions I didn't know existed. Anyone who's ever had abuse with drugs or alcohol knows how numb you can be. And when you stop doing that, how emotional you could be. Take that times a million, and I just got this punch in my chest, and I felt this love, and I just melted. It was like, I could relax. And I only talked to Trev for a few minutes there. Basically, the gist of our conversation was, I'm connected to you, you're connected to me, with our information that I want to exchange with you. If you want to know really about how this thing works, how your life works, the universe, I'm here. And if not, it's okay, you know? So it's scary.
Like a personal line, yeah, like a personal, phone call, a sexual interaction, webinar, whatever.
It was the most intense. Like I said, I had a couple visions here and there, but this was so much more. There was only one experience I'd ever had before that matched that, and that was me experiencing like a firsthand version of a past life. But this was even twice as intense as that. So it was just like the most vivid dream you could think of in times by two. It was real. It felt like I was right there. So I thought I was a little crazy. I stopped meditating now. To understand the complexities of me to stop meditating, I was meditating literally for at least 3 hours, sometimes up to 6 or 8 hours in one day, every day, without stop, without fail. And that 3 days I just stopped, and I thought about it. I talked to people. I asked if I was crazy. And my one consensus was, you're messing with those binaural beats. They could be doing something. Try it without it. And I did, and I went back, and I saw Trev again. And this time it wasn't as scary. And we talked about 4 or 5 times about a lot of stuff, a lot of things. And he led me to a friend who led me to a video about UFOs, and they talked about channeling. And all the things that we had talked about in the last 3 or 4 conversations came up in this channel, but just in different verbiage, completely different way it was being expressed. And it was funny because the video that this guy showed me, my friend, had 2 things about channeling. One was this 4 or 5 minutes of deep detail, and the other one was just a few words. This channeling is second to none to this channeling. So I checked out the one that they only talked about for a second because that pulled me in more. And that's where I found the communication that I had with Trev was so similar. So I worked with Trev for about 2 years after that, after I thought to myself, this is either real or it's going to lead me to an experience that I need to have. I'm going to try working with that. I worked for a little over 2 years, a little under 2 years, right around. And after that, I decided I wanted to channel. At that point, I started channeling for the public. I was doing it all the time. And after a few years of that, I'd always heard, Trev always talked about this one being, and he called him Deneb Cygnus, which Deneb is a star and Cygnus is a constellation. So I figured he was just, most aliens who use telepathy, they don't need names. So I figured he was just giving me a little assignment, maybe where he lives, where he's at.
Like
So,
a little clue or something, you know.
exactly. A little crumb trail, they call him, yeah.
Yeah.
And after I heard about him for a long time, I started doing this book with this guy from Brazil. He contacted me. I said, I've seen your channeling. Can I ask this being questions and see what I feel about them? And if I like it, then we could do a book together. I said, okay, as long as we can get this out to people for free, I'll do it. And he said, no problem, we'll do that. So we worked together, and in that book, this guy asked Trev to bring other entities in, kind of be able to bring a message or something of use or that could help the collective. And there comes Ardif. 21 pages, I think, of the book was where Ardif came through me the very first time. The most profound information about how the universe works, the most in-depth information about how the evolution of the soul works, and the most intense and not even heart blowing, it was more mind and heart blowing information in a channel state that I'd ever heard before. Now, at that point, I didn't listen to a lot of channeling because I didn't want anything to influence my connection with Trevor, what was going on there. But what was said was so amazing. It made me look and start searching for other things. And there were a few places where there were some similarities, but for the most part, it was brand new stuff, something that I never could find on the internet at that time. So it was amazing and powerful. And that is when I met Ardif. He said, my name's Ardif, and this is what I want to tell you. And that was it. And Ardif stayed quiet for a while. But afterwards, after about a year or so of channeling, just with Trev, even more for people, Ardif came through. It was on a radio show me and my fiance, Kalina, were doing. And he said, I'm ready to work with you full time now. And this was like the most exciting thing I'd ever heard at that point, because as much as I loved Trev, I thirsted for the deepest version of knowledge I could get. And so far, Ardif was one of the only ones that ever gave me that kind of intensity in the first step. So I started working with them, and I learned a lot about him and Trev, and I suppose that's probably pretty important too. Trev is this gigantic being, but he's also a version of humans. And the reason I am hesitant to say the next words is because every time I say the R word, people start freaking out really bad. But
can I say, is he a reptilian?
That was the one.
How did I know?
It scares people to their core when I say that. And this entity is a reptilian and human hybrid. So a lot of people first assume Dracos, Earth reptilians, really bad things, but he's actually a future version of the human called the Nihal, which is one of many probable future versions of humanity. We've got literally infinite amounts of probabilities and timelines that we could go on. The one that lands where his reality comes is called the Nihal. And they took their own DNA and connected it to a reptilian being, and that's how Trev's race came to be. And it's like the reptilian that looks between a cross of the Komodo dragon and one of the great reptiles of the Permian era. And I can never remember the name of that thing, but it looks just like that in their second density or animal. Their race.
Do they wear clothes? Does he wear clothes, Bob?
Yes.
I'm interested.
Yes, he wears clothing, and it's funny because when I saw it, That's part of the reason I thought I was insane when I first saw him with clothes. The most stereotypical space uniform you could think of was what I saw him wearing.
Oh wow, was he in like a little zip-up suit thing, like
Almost.
jumpsuit?
It was
Wow.
a silver robe with golden boots, a full body robe with these gold little boots, and it looked shiny. And I laughed because I'm like, I know I'm crazy at this point because every fake movie you've ever seen, everybody who's had sightings where most of the public say, "Oh, that person's crazy," that's what they say. And when I saw that, I was like, "You've got to be kidding me!" Same thing. So it was, yeah, that's what they usually wear. But I found out too later on that the reason for that is because the shiny metal, metallic thing, that's just something that their animal version used to love. So as they evolved and became more sentient, they carried the characteristics of that energy with them. So it's funny and it's kind of dorky, but that's the way he works. Now with Aradif, this is a whole different thing. Aradif is an ancient Pleiadian, we call him, but he's really from the star called Deneb. So he's the Nebian. And this guy is about 3'9". He's a little short guy. He's blue. He's got light, pale blue skin, gigantic purple eyes, long purple hair, and he looks like a little humanoid. But I've never had the personal face to face interaction with him like I have with Treb. I can connect to artists telepathically just like I can with Treb now after a few years of handling and working with Treb and Astro. But I can communicate with him that way. I just have never seen him. So what I get from his own version is just a little flashes that myself or like my partner, fiance Kalina, she's able to connect with Ardif really well too. And she's been able to see more of them than I have. So our descriptions of what we've told people, they've given us artwork, and it was spot on. One second, I'm going to get a drink here real quick too.
Yeah, you're all right. Could you send us some pictures? So is there some pictures floating around that you've
There
got?
are.
Yeah.
Actually, on my Facebook pages with Trev and Ardif, it's funny. I'm like, thank you, Beta. Actually, I'll just give them some links here on this. But while we're talking, I'll give you some links. There's, it's like, sorry, I'm like a teenager with ADHD when it comes to multitasking. I'm really bad at it. But these photographs that I'm sending the links in the chat room for, these are probably the most. But I've literally have a page for everything on Facebook. So if you type in Rob Gauthier on Facebook, there's literally like 10 different pages that I get.
Yeah, I've seen a few. I'm like, where is he? Yeah, but I found you anyway.
I'm there. Yeah, I sent a lot. Like each being I've ever channeled, I've channeled the Nihal, which were the ones that created Treb's race and Ardif, and that's actually why I got the ESP Whisperer name. After channeling Treb for so long, he would always bring these other beings forward, and pretty soon I was able to start connecting with them more deeply. Like when I first started bringing in other beings, they had a lot of Treb's characteristics in the vocal sense. Treb's very unique when you hear him. He sounds very jovial and super excited in this weird tone and accent. So
there's one that sounds like an Englishman. Who's
yeah,
the one that
he sounds like a Englishman. Yeah.
Yeah, he does. I'm like, wow. Do I know him? Do I know him?
It's funny too because I've always, when I first looked into channeling, the one thing that always bothered me was all these different weird voices. And when I first started talking to Trev, I'm like, I want to channel. I'd heard a couple channelers who could bring forward a really normal sounding voice. And when I first connected to Trev, it was even worse than it is now. And I was like, damn it, I'm going to be one of those channelers. So it's very hard for people who don't know about channeling to take it seriously. And I don't blame them. If I didn't have my experience, and someone showed me Daryl Anka, Bashar, or
yeah, I was going to say the first time I saw Bashar, I was like, ooh, what? Whoa! And I love him. I absolutely adore him. But I saw this guy here, like, this and hello, and I was like, oh, what? It was amazing but you can see the physical change, and people and sketches and stuff. You're going to get them and wherever, but they go in, they study them. But when you actually look at your videos and Daryl's videos, which are, you can quite clearly see some kind of transition, some kind of connection taking place, and that's what we can't dismiss here.
It is. The characteristics of each entity are so specific. Airlanka channels char, you can see that change. One of the most compelling changes in all of channeling, if you look at Jane Roberts with Seth, Jane Roberts to Seth, a lot of Christians use that as, hey, this person's being possessed by a demon because the face was so different and almost contorted to a degree. She took on so much of that Seth's energy that her body almost physically morphed over to that energy. And it's funny with my own channeling, it's very intense that same way, different characteristics, facial expressions. But Treb and Ardif are so different. Treb's got this body language like a little puppy where he's all over the place and smiling as big as my head can allow. And Ardif is just sits there perfectly still and barely moves and sometimes talks with his hands. So it's so different to see that energy. And then there's all sorts of other beings. Like I said, I start bringing in these beings. At this point, I've channeled over 150 different extraterrestrial beings. So it's almost at 200 right now. I think we're about 185 or so.
How do you know that they're safe channel? Because this is the problem for most people that do channeling. And I have a lot of people connect me and say, Dolly, how do I know that I'm channeling the right thing? How do you know?
This is a perfect question because that is the most difficult hurdle for 90% of people who want to channel or start channeling and never finish to get over. If what Kevin Ardis has told me is correct, then I believe that we create our reality from the very foundation and core of our consciousness, which means if I believe that negative beings can take over my body and rule my own consciousness, then I can give them that power. I can give the energy to those entities to take over my body. But when I believe that I'm a sovereign creator who's connected to God, who has just as much power as any physical being in this universe, and that I control my consciousness and nothing can take it over unless it has the vibration that I choose to allow in, that's how I'm going to experience it. And
I was told the same recently, and I think the importance of claiming sovereignty. Can you tell people a little bit how they do that? Because that's quite important.
You can do it through intent and belief by itself. That's a very hard stretch for a lot of people because they've been told their whole life, you are not powerful. People will overpower you and overstrength you. So affirmations are a really good form. Meditations, a lot of people use the protective meditations, the bubbles of light. One that I found that is very powerful that I've taught other people who struggle with this problem. I don't know the proper name for it, and I think it's something like a Tenkai. I'm not going to try my Japanese now, but basically it's an energetic barrier. So what you do is you create 9 walls of energy around you. And the first one's white energy, the second one's violet, the third one's green, the fourth one's blue.
Like the chakras.
Yes, you can do that too. And then using the chakra system is perfect. But this specific one after the blue, then you create the rest of white. And all that energy basically keeps you within your own shell. And the color reasoning is so that you can allow entities, whites, purples, all of that energy. It's hard for a low vibrational frequency to come through it. So if you can reason to that, then you can use that as an intent. But you really don't need anything. You just need to really believe. And the way that Treb and Ardif have described the way existence works. If I myself believe something 99%, then I'm creating a 1% chance for that to not happen or for something else outside of that to happen. So you really have to know that you are truly connected to that creator consciousness. And I've never been fearful of that. When I've seen people back in the churches who would say that they were possessed, or people who had negative entities attaching to them, I always knew it was because of negative emotional energy inside themselves. So I always had that predisposal to just innately knowing that negativity can only be co-created, not experienced. It has to be a part of you that allows that interaction. So for me, it's 100% belief, but for other people, you have to work on that. The one thing that I suggest with a lot of people is start channeling the versions of yourself that you trust, your higher self. I even teach people how to channel their chakras. When you channel your chakras, then your chakras are telling you very easy. The first time I teach people, when I teach this class to people, I have never had one person who hasn't channeled their chakras the first time they ever tried. Even people who are novice, they get in there and they channel. So if you can communicate with your chakras and your energy, then it's safe. Channeling really is not about bringing another being in to take over your body. What channeling is two consciousnesses connecting, sharing an energy.
And Rob, yeah,
Do it.
Rob, I really,
Yeah.
Rob, I really want to say thank you for clarifying that, and I can agree with everything you're saying as I have experienced it before. I myself I've never gone on like publicly like you have like and did events, but I do personal channelings via like my Sacred Garden of Light, my life coaching and intuitive healing, where I channel the Pleiadian Council of 9 and 11. And when I do this, I do speak in a sort of British accent, you know. So
I've got a family. I've got a whole family of black sauciness.
So, you know, I really want to say, Rob, yeah, it all goes back to kind of like what we were talking about earlier with Bernard about this discernment thing. It's really, you know, you give that permission. You know what I mean? You listen. We are all channels. Every single human being, in my opinion, is a channel of a certain source of energy. Okay, you've got people, you know, running around out here, you know, just going crazy and shooting people and, you know, or whatever, just doing their thing. I do too. I do too. I just wanted to reiterate that fact that he just said for the viewers to mark as very important. They need to know that channeling is not a dangerous thing. It's all about, like as Rob was saying, it's all about your belief system. Precisely. That's all I wanted to say and interject in. So yeah, as my experience. So
you channel quite a lot, don't you, Lindsay? You quite a lot of people, and you know, you've been channeling for many years.
Yeah, I've been channeling for actively channeling for 4 years now. So yeah, and you know, Rob, like you were saying, it's not the easiest thing to do as far as publicly, you know, because of all the judgments people get. But like I said, hey everyone, wake up! You're channel 2. You know, we're all channeling information from some source, albeit ourselves or something else. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely, and I understand too people's issue with channeling. I understand their hesitation or reservations, but you're right. Everybody does channel. Everyone can channel, and everyone can even channel the same way I do it. I'm a very deep trance channeler, so when I go way out. That's why I'm able. Like when I'm channeling, I'm actually talking to heaven that astral state. So I don't remember what's going on around me. I don't remember what happened. But a lot of people can do conscious channeling, And anyone can do channeling because it is just a two energy connection. People channel music, art every day. One thing that I try to describe to people about channeling that really helps them understand more of what it is. If you're standing in the middle of a room and you're at a party, and there's a person 2 foot to the right of you and one 4 foot to the left of you, 10 foot in front of you, and 20 foot behind you, your body represents consciousness. Now it's loud, you can't hear anything going on. So, in order for you to be able to converse with someone, you actually have to expand. So, your body would expand. And the first person it bumps into is the person 2 foot to the right of you. That represents consciousness that's closest vibration to you already. So once you bump into that person after you've expanded, you can communicate. And when you do, you're going to learn more about you, more about that person, more about experiences, swap stories, have energy. Then you're able to expand more. And then you bump into that person 4 foot on the left. And the more that you grow, the more the people that you bump in until you know everything that's going on in the room at once because you filled that room. And
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Like, your, you know,
absolutely, that's the best way to describe it, so people can understand my journey. I bumped into Trev because I needed some room to grow. And when I bumped into Trev, he taught me so much. I kept growing, and then I bumped into Arda. Now I'm channeling, like I said, I've channeled. I don't channel consistently these things, but I channel regularly. Trev, Arda, even Metatron now, which is another big, huge energy. Not extraterrestrial, but it's still huge. So it's an experience, and when people think about channeling, that's really something that I try to advocate for. You don't have to really believe what it is. You don't have to believe the person. You don't have to believe what's going on there. If you want to tell yourself the person who's sitting in front of me that brings this really intricate, beautiful information is just tapping into a part of themselves, that's partially true too, because they are going through their higher self to connect to these things. Whatever you tell yourself, just try to be open to hear it. And if something doesn't connect with you, you don't need it anyway. That's why I like when Bernard was talking about discernment, accept what's right for you, because channeling should be taken, especially by those who have a hard time with channeling. If you're open to hearing what's being said, the rest will come easy. So,
wow. Well, Rob, I've got to ask you while we've got some time left. You know what I'm going to ask you. Is there any chance Trev can join us this evening? Has he got anything to say? All right, Trev. Is it possible to make that connection?
it is. It takes a while to do it. It's almost a 10-minute process, so it would take some time. I could bring them forward, but right now I'm telepathically linked with them. When you smile, and my smile gets so big, my whole face crinkles up. That's actually Trev's energy pushing forward. So he's been with me for the majority of the night. He's doing it again with my face. It's funny, Nina can sit across the room and say, "There's Trev, there's Art." I could do it, but like I said, it would take about 10 minutes to do. I'd shut down the camera and breathe and get ready for it. And then, and if that's something that you guys are good with, and maybe when the next dinner comes in 10 minutes before, I could try if it's not too late. But yeah, I might be able to.
Okay, that could be interesting. I think we've got one more speaker to do. So if you like zone out for a bit and come back in with Seb, I think that finish the evening and the conference off for World Ascension absolutely, cosmically. So I think that would be awesome.
I will see what I can do. If it doesn't get too late, I'll see if I can bring in Trevi or Arda, because both of them are amazing in their own rights. It's interesting when, like I said, the mannerisms, the energy with both of them. Trev is more, in my opinion, people go to him when they want to know about their emotions, their connections to their heart, relationships with other people. He's really based on the heart energy. And it's not that Ardif isn't, because Ardif is also, in its own way, a very loving being. But Ardif is a really complex, mathematical, scientific mind that really shares from that point of view. It's funny, Ardif explains these things, densities, dimensions, how the soul evolves. And I have spoken about it publicly many times and tried to share. So I teach this 101 class that I shared on YouTube so that people could start getting understanding. I spent 2 hours talking about it and barely got over just the difference between densities and dimensions. Then I do another one and try explaining incarnation cycles. But all of this really complex information, it's like I would literally need years to reiterate it. And it's funny because I haven't been connected to artists that long, but because he's so much part of my daily life, so much vibrationally sharing with me, I know this stuff like the back of my hand, and I could sit there. It's funny when we do 3 day workshops, I say, all right, I'm going to talk to you guys about this for an hour. And by the end of that hour, I'm like, we have so much more to go, guys. It's really intense though, but both of them have that sharing. And if, like I say, time permitting, I will try to bring back Ardif or Trev, and I'll make sure they have something really great to say, perhaps about Ascension.
That would be excellent. That is what we want, How better to get it from Galactic Source direct here with us. That would be amazing. Can I ask you, Rob, about have you had UFO experiences? Because you greet and see these things, and so can you touch on a little bit about your experiences with craft and?
Absolutely. The first time I saw 113, that's when that energy changed in me. I found out later that was a ship that was connected to some negative beings. And the reason it triggered that experience for me was because in my own aura and in my own previous part of my life, I had connected to that negative energy before. So it triggered that in me and it sent me off on this path, but the path ends up being a good thing. After that, after I started coming out of my depression, I've seen hundreds of them so far. Every time me and my fiance Kalina are out and about, we're just, we'll be going out to throw out the garbage. And all of a sudden we're looking up in the sky and there something is. And a lot of people misidentify UFOs because they're not sure what satellites are. They see planes in the fog. So there's a lot of that goes on. But I've learned to turn that part off because I scientifically I figured out the differences from the way they look. But these that I experienced with Kalina and myself are irrefutable. They're not something that flies in a straight line. They don't fly at the average flight of a plane. They're usually doing one of those numbers, zigzagging all over, coming up here and then there. So all of these experiences I've experienced with her have been powerful. But even before I met her, I'd go out on my porch. I used to live out in the woods and 13 acres of forest. And I would go out there and I would look up in the sky. And almost every couple of weeks, I would see something, whether it was something real small or something powerful. But me and Christina saw a whole, like 6 or 7 beings that were connected together, 6 or 7 crafts. And we watched that happen last year in the summer. So we always see these crafts. And when I asked Trevor Ardif about what's going on there, they're just like it's part of your guys' excitement, and you keep creating and drawing it in. A lot of the time, 2 people can stand next to each other. One person can see something the other can't, and that's because the person who's seeing it is literally looking into a higher dimension. Right now, with our ascension process, we're going between 3rd and 4th density, which means that our energy is shifting into a higher dimensional type of plane. And that's not very important in the overall fact. The only reason I bring it up is because our excitement and us as humans being multidimensional beings gives us that extra sight. And when we're there and we're excited and we're open and willing, anybody, that's what C5 is about, calling in your experience, not waiting for one, calling it in. And when you can bring the person who's not excited or whose vibration isn't open for it, and they're up there looking and can't see it, it's because that energy is not ready for it, and the one who is seeing it is. So it's all about personal responsibility, I would say, but it's not really. It's all about personal intent and personal co-creation. A lot of people are like, I just so mad I can't see crafts, I can't see UFOs.
Yeah.
them because you're so upset by the fact. You have to be excited and open for it.
Yeah.
Usually we see it when we least expect.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah. Mine always appear like mad ladies. Like I met two beings in the middle of a clothing superstore, and I was with my daughter. My daughter saw them as well. She looked at me. I looked. I think they were my hybrid children that had just slipped through time because they only had a time slot. And there was a boy and a girl, and you could tell that they were out of place. They got lilac hair and lilac eyes, and my daughter was with me, who's 17, and she looked at me, and I looked at her, and she was like, "Mum, are you seeing this?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm seeing it." But we're in the middle of a shop, I can't go and, and say, "Hey, what planet are you from?" I just looked at them in awe. But that's the thing, isn't it? They appear, when you're in tune and you're on that frequency, or something's happened to you that's activated this in you. They just appear at the most bizarre moments, and it rocks my world. Every time I'm always shocked. I've seen hundreds of crafts, I've been in crafts, I've had beings visit me, like you, and still every time I am like, wow. I get a little bit star cosmic shrug, and is this happening? Am I mad? Am I crazy? But it happens.
Yeah. Well, I understand it's something for me that feels so natural. I don't get too worked up unless it's some extraordinarily beautiful up close sighting. And I've only had a couple of those really, really, like, you can see the shape and the indents and the texture of the craft. I've only had a couple of those, but even the ones that are really bright lights and stuff, I just know now. If I would have told myself 8 years ago, you're going to be around UFOs all the time, you're going to be able to channel all these things, I would have laughed. But it's so normal now, and it's funny like I said, when I'm channeling, I'm talking to Treb, and we can be on a ship, we can be on a planet, we can be on other planets, and I've been part of that for so long now. I started channeling in 2010, and I knew Treb for 2 years, so that's almost 8 years now. In 8 years, I've been doing this every day. So it's like, what did you and Trev talk about? Kalina will ask me, and I'm like, oh, we're just hanging out, What, what do you mean you're just hanging out? You have this being who's great intelligence and amazing mind and all this knowledge, and you're just hanging out. And I'm like, yeah, it's part of the norm. It's just like people who live in war-torn countries. They see death, destruction every day. They become used to it, and it just is part of their time, part of their day.
It's thrown into your world, and and you've openly accepted it, who you are, and connected. There's not a lot that we can do about it, is it really? Than rather just carry on with it, and accept and go along with it.
Absolutely, and that's how it works. And people who do it with good or bad, it's kind of the perception that they've got with it. It's nice to be able to live through life and have, for the majority of the time, good perceptions about things. A lot of people are like, you channel, you work with these things, you must be some guru or omega, and it's like, no, I am a human who gets my ass kicked just as bad as you do emotionally, mentally, all the time. But the reason why I can smile 90% of the time is because I've learned that when I'm creating something that's bad, or when I just need an experience, like my father passing, it was horrible. He was my best friend. He passed in October last year. I was devastated, but what helped me move on is because I knew that was his part of his journey, and I'm willing to accept and to let go and to know that as a creator of my own reality, as my father, creator of his, my son, his, Kalina, hers, we're all meant to be experiencing what we are. And if we're not, we'll change it soon enough. We'll go back to wherever we need to be. And that creation, trusting yourself, trusting that the universe will allow you to create, that God doesn't pick sides, that God doesn't say, this is bad, this is good, this is what you need to do. just letting you decide and being a part of that experience and being a part of your own creation, that's what gets me through. And that's what Trev and Artist has taught me. You know, you create, you're the one who chooses. No one up here is gonna look at bad one way or the other. You know, you gotta do what you've gotta do. And being able to transfer that from myself to other humans has been the hardest, most payoff of an emotional release I've ever had. I can look at someone who's attacking these people like on the news, and instead of me just saying, "I hate that guy," I'm so mad at that guy. I'm like, he's went through trauma. That person's got some things. He needed that experience, and as sad as it is, as bad as it is, we are all infinite beings, and we'll all be back again. So
exactly, that's Rob, that's definitely what we were, saying, like I was saying earlier about this whole, if someone were to, it has been the hardest experience, this line of work, but if someone would be like, oh, drop all your beliefs, do this, or die, or I'm gonna put a bullet through your head, I would just be like, just go ahead, do it, I'll be back. Like,
that's it.
Like period.
You're gonna be there anyway. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly.
It's such an important timeline, and these things have come forward now, and we have to take note of, what.
Right. Dolly, I agree, because here's the thing. People out there who, as one of the speakers, John, spoke of last night, people out there who missed that. About bridging the communication barrier between people who have had experiences like ourselves and those who have not yet. And it's perfectly fine that these people have not had these experiences because it's just not their time, or that's not what they've chosen yet, etc. But we do need to get this message across that it's not easy, and it hasn't been easy for us, Rob, Dolly, and even all the participants, and even for Andy. Andrew Basciago, he dropped his law practice. Yes, he does practice on the side a little bit. He dropped everything so that he could run for candidacy and tell the American people, or the world, the truth. And we have walked away from these normal lives and appearing to people as fitting into the mold. We've had friends drop off, people that were our people who are always supposed to be there for us when we told them we have this experience. Here's the deal. Like you were saying, Rob, when it was something as real to you as you and I sitting here, I had an experience. My first encounter with a spirit was when I was 7 or 5 years old. And it was literally right there in front of my face. That's not my imagination. I'm sorry. Yeah. I wasn't on drugs when I was that old. You're more sober. You're more sober than an adult. So you're not having. So here we are. We're in this timeline where we're really approaching this pinnacle, and I think it's so important that the message is out there that is to be shared. Guys, this has been not a super easy process for us. Why are we just going to come out and say these things, especially when it's even uncomfortable for us to admit in the first place?
We don't want to look crazy, do we? We don't want to, why would we want to make ourselves look totally crazy if these things are happening?
Exactly. Just like, for example, if Andrew Basciago was not involved, and he's not the only one who's been involved with this Mars recruitment and this, all this stuff and these jump rooms and this secret space program, I was one, and these memories, as Andrew was speaking of earlier, they do come back, and we have to understand that these are memories. Like, we're not, it happens, and we, like I said, we're just finally at the point, after X amount of years, where we're like, okay, I can't lie to myself anymore. I can't have this knowledge and allow my fellow humans, I am my brother's keeper. cannot allow them to be continuously fed lies after lies after lies. The same day that the 28 documents were released from the government, releasing the official documents saying that 9/11 was an inside job, everybody's out here chasing effing Pokemon. You know, I'm sorry, but people, it's time to get it's time to get real. They release the information. It's online to view. There's so much information out there. Your government.
It's happening, but it's happening so softly and so slowly, that people are not noticing it because, like you say, Lindsay, they'd rather say that it's Pokemon.
Well, and another thing is, Dolly, is it's very difficult, as I think it is for all of us, kind of like Rob was saying, initially to kind of face the truth and realize, like, oh my gosh, has this been happening? Like, it's like when we first watched Daryl Naka, and Bashar, we're like, who, like, what is he okay?
What?
Like, should I be watching him? I felt the same way. And and then we go through this discernment, and then we experience it, and it's like, oh my God, like Rob said, like, if somebody would have told me in May, Rob, if somebody would have told me in May that we would be holding this conference right now, I would have been like,
no.
Even though I started, World Ascension, or tried to get it off the ground, in 2012, World Ascension conference. It didn't work. And then all of a sudden, literally in a month, it was like a few days, it was literally manifested. Like,
we sort of discussed it in 2012, and then what happened? It just disappeared, and then all of a sudden, they contacted me, and it was like, boom, it's there, and everything was in place. We didn't have to try really hard to get what we were doing.
Dolly, it literally landed in our laps, you, me, and Laura. And by the way, everyone, just like as of last night, Laura, she sends her apologies. She was not able to make it. She had something unexpected come up. So, anyway, I just, Rob, thank you so much for being on. You've been amazing, and
I think he's gonna bring us back. He's gonna bring us back, Rob?
Is that is that okay?
We gotta get to my mom's depends on what time we can land, but
okay,
they
great.
should let me know ASAP.
Great, because we do have to allow Marina's up next anyway. So.
All right. Well, if she's up next, is it now? Correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I just want to say before I jump off, thank you guys so much for having me on.
Yes.
You guys tried in 2012 and it landed now.
It landed in our laps.
And it's needed now, and that's why I never sweat the idea of who believes me, who doesn't, what kind of heat I get from the public. Because I know everybody who needs the information that we're sharing is going to get it when they need it. And I'm going to be able to share in that way. And my time was for tonight, and your guys' time is this year. And I'm so grateful we could all do this together, guys.
Me too.
Thank you so much.
Love you guys.
We'll see you later.
10 minutes about what's going to get hold of my mom.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, guys. Love you. Bye.
Love you too.
Thank you. Okay. I'm handing back to you, Lindsay.
Yes.
I'm gonna go